Hello, my name is Phil Roudebush. I'm an Extension Master Gardener volunteer in Buncombe County. Today, I'd like to share some information with you on processing and using culinary herbs. I've maintained a large herb garden for over 20 years. I usually grow around 30 different herbs and primarily focus on those herbs to be used in the kitchen. What I'd like to do today is share with you some information about how I process and use these herbs. In addition to this presentation, there are a number of other resources that you might find helpful. The first is Rodale's Illustrated Encyclopedia of Herbs. It's available in most bookstores and online for around $25, and it's an excellent general reference about herbs. Not only does it have information about individual herbs, it also has information about growing herbs, drying them, using them for dyeing, medicinal purposes, etc. If you want to focus more on herbs for cooking purposes, I like Jill Norman's book, Herbs and Spices, The Cook's Reference, and I'll share with you some recipes later that come from her book. It's beautifully illustrated. It's available for about $30 in bookstores or online. If you want to explore kind of unique ways to use herbs, I like the Lavender Cookbook by Sharon Shipley. I've really explored the last few years about using lavender, not only for its fragrance and aroma, but also used in cooking. And so if you want a unique view of using lavender and other herbs, I would encourage you to look at that. And finally, there's the Herb Society website. The mission of the Herb Society of America is to promote the knowledge, use, and delight of herbs through educational programs and research, and their website is an excellent resource. It has an essential guide to beginners' herb gardens, a PowerPoint presentation on beginning herb gardening, and essential guides to a number of different herbs, which include recipes. And I'll share a couple of those recipes with you later. I've also created a handout or a set of notes on processing and using culinary herbs. These are available as an attachment to this presentation, and I would encourage you to go there for detailed information about most of the recipes that we're going to talk about today. So how do we use culinary herbs? We can certainly use them most commonly either as fresh herbs that we may grow ourselves or that we purchase in the store. Oftentimes we will purchase dried herbs, and it's easy to dry our own herbs as well. And then probably the third major way is freezing. You can either freeze directly or blanch and freeze. I most commonly will use frozen pestos. We'll talk about making pestos later and how to freeze those. We can also use herb-infused vinegars, oils, and butter. Using fresh herbs for cooking, my first recommendation for people is if you're growing your own herbs, that you create your herb garden near your kitchen. When I moved to my previous property 25 years ago, I took a flower garden that was near the kitchen and turned that into my herb garden. It was only about 50 feet either through the garage or off the back deck to where I could cut my fresh herbs. I would encourage you to do that. Currently, I live in a townhome, and so I have my herbs in pots, either on the front porch or the back deck, or in the landscaping around the edge of the home. So again, rule number one, if you're going to use and grow fresh herbs for cooking, establish your herb garden relatively near the kitchen so it will be convenient. You can also create and cut your own herb bouquets, as pictured here in the middle. And if they are cut fresh and put in water, they will generally last for about 7 to 10 days, and they make a beautiful bouquet in your kitchen, very fragrant, as well as then the herbs will be handy for cooking. You can also process the herbs and put them in a Ziploc bag, put them in the refrigerator. They'll generally last 1 to 2 weeks in that form. Our rule of thumb is to use 2 teaspoons of a fresh herb or 2 teaspoons of a herb mixture per 4-person serving. If you're using dried herbs, the general rule of thumb is to use about half that amount. But again, you will find out through trial and error in cooking how much herbs you like to use in any particular recipe. If you're going to go ahead and freeze herbs, you can do that in Ziploc bags, and they will stay for 6 to 9 months in the freezer. There are a few herbs that need to be blanched first, and probably the most popular one is basil. Basil is native to Sri Lanka and southern India, so it's very cold intolerant. And once the temperature gets below 40 degrees, and normally it will freeze and turn black and die. And the same thing will happen if you put basil in the freezer. So the best thing to do with basil and some other herbs is to blanch it first. And the easiest way to do that is to take the leaves, put it in a strainer, take a kettle of boiling water and just pour it over the leaves for a few seconds and then dry it and freeze it from there. And that will help the basil to maintain its color and freshness. We often use dried herbs that we purchase in the store, or you can certainly go ahead and dry herbs yourself. It's fairly easy to do, and there are a number of different techniques. I usually just take herbs and put them on a dry cookie sheet and put them in a dark area and just let them dry naturally. You can put them in the screen and put them in the sun. You can use a microwave. You can use your oven set on low, or you can certainly use a commercial dehydrator as well. There are many herbs where the dried version of the herb is very similar in aroma and flavor to the fresh version. And so examples of that would be lavender. The essential oils in lavender oftentimes are retained for long periods of time in the dried herb versus the fresh. Another example is lemon verbena, which are leaves that we get off a small shrub. Those leaves have a very waxy coating, and that has a tendency, or even in the dried state, to retain those oils to give that natural kind of lemon or citrusy flavor or aroma. However, many of the herbs will be quite different in their dried form than they are versus fresh. And I've shown you one example here is tarragon. When it's fresh, contains a high concentration of a compound called estragol, which has sort of an anise-like scent. But when you dry tarragon, all is a water-soluble compound, and it's sort of lost along with the moisture. So then a compound called coumarin becomes more pronounced, which has sort of a new hay type of aroma and flavor. So again, if you do dry herbs, you may want to retain some in a fresh state and compare it to the dried state, both in its aroma and flavor. And you may find that there are places where you want to use the herb fresh, and in other situations, use it when it's dry. There are a number of different herb mixtures that are inspired by French cuisine. These are shown here. The first are called fine herbs, and these examples include parsley, chive, tarragon, chervil, and there are some others. And these are primarily added at the end of cooking. They usually have a very delicate flavor. So you add those at the end of cooking. You may use them as a garnishment, chopped and placed on top of the food when it's plated. Herbes de Provence is an assortment of dried herbs that's said to reflect those used commonly in southern France. However, I hate to inform you that Herbes de Provence that we find in the store is really just a marketing scheme. It was begun by a company called Ducros, which was a herb company in France that's now been purchased by McCormick's. And so Herbes de Provence is really just a dried mixture of herbs. It was primarily a way for marketing to the European and American consumer. Typically includes summer savory, basil, thyme, oregano, rosemary, and fennel seed. What you're going to find is that various Herbes de Provence from different companies will include different ingredients. Garnis are bundles of more pungent herbs, which release their flavors in long cooking. And so they are usually bundles of pungent herbs such as thyme, orange peel. And I've included in the handout or notes that accompany this presentation a whole host of garnis from Jill Norman's book. And she has different bouquet garnis for beef and pork, vegetables, fish, poultry, etc. Adobos occur throughout Central and South American cooking. And here's an example, again, from Jill Norman's book of one that's used in Cuba. They can be used either dry as a rub, or they can be used as a liquid, as a marinade, And so the recipe shown in the notes includes thyme, oregano, cilantro, garlic, cumin, black pepper, and then usually some type of citrus juice. Aliño means seasoning or dressing and is used throughout South America for herb and spice mixtures to rub on the meat, poultry, or fish. It can be used to flavor soups and casseroles. And again, this can be used either with dried herbs or fresh herbs. And the recipe that I have, again, comes from Jill Norman's book. It includes thyme, rosemary, oregano, sage, mint, lemon balm, marjoram, and tarragon. And this recipe is fairly simple. You just use 1 tablespoon of each of these herbs, either in a dried or fresh preparation. Pesto comes from the word pestare, which is Italian, meaning to pound. And that's because the original pesto used a mortar and pestle to go ahead and pound or grind the herbs. Many times the term pesto, people think of only pesto Genovese, which is a basil-based pesto that includes basil, garlic, pine nuts, olive oil, and then when it's used, some type of hard Italian cheese, such as Romano. Pesto Genovese is certainly one form of pesto, but it's not the only pesto. But what I'd really like to do is share with you a number of different recipes that I make and use that really expand pesto beyond pesto Genovese. But when I make pestos, rather than using a mortar and pestle, I use a modern food processor. This just shows my Cuisinart, and in it, I will put some garlic and some thyme and some sage. And we'll go ahead and chop that up in the food processor. And then I will usually add something that provides some grit against which the chopping action can occur. And that's usually some type of nut. It can be pine nuts, although pine nuts could be fairly pricey. So I'll usually use sliver almonds. If you want to use a nut-free recipe, then I'll take an ice cube and break it up into ice slivers. And we'll just put the ice in there and use that again as some grit against which the chopping can occur. So we go ahead and put it in the food processor, chop it up until we get something that looks like this, which is just the chopped fresh herbs. And then what you'll do is go ahead and continue to let the food processor run or pulse it and just dribble in the oil of your preference. It's going to either be olive oil or any type of vegetable oil until you achieve the consistency that you want. Next, I will take that pesto, and we can certainly go ahead and use it that way fresh. So you can put it in the refrigerator and use it within a week. Or what I will do is just go ahead and freeze it. And I use a cookie dough scoop because it's a nice portioned amount and makes a nice small dollop of herbs. And put that on wax paper, on a cookie tray, put that in the freezer, let that freeze for about 12 to 24 hours. And then I'll have what I call herb cubes. And I'll remove these, put them in a Ziploc bag. And typically I will use them within the next 6 months, but they'll last for about 6 to 9 months in the freezer. Many people in the past have advocated using ice cube trays to make these frozen herb cubes. I did that the first couple of times and just found that it was much easier to use a cookie dough scoop to put out the proportion I want, usually 1 to 2 tablespoons. If you don't want that much herb, you can take one of these frozen cubes, and it's very easy to cut them in half and use half the amount. Again, very easy for this just to sit in the freezer and pull them out whenever you need to use them. So that's my basic mechanism for making pestos and freezing my herbs. So I'm going to show you a series of recipes. These are all found in detail in the handout or notes that accompany this presentation. These two come from the Moosewood Restaurant Cooks at Home cookbook. One's called Pesto Provencal. The other one is Fine Herbs Pesto. And they're very similar. They usually contain a large proportion of parsley. And then for Provencal includes thyme, rosemary, oregano. You can use scallions, or I usually use chives, almonds. Again, you can use any nut, but I usually use slivered almond, and pine nuts can be used. And then either a vegetable or olive oil. Most of the recipes talk about adding salt and pepper. I have a tendency not to put those in my pestos because I'm going to add salt or pepper to my preferred taste when I make whatever I'm making. And so I usually don't include salt and pepper, but you can certainly do that within that frozen or fresh pesto cube that you make. Fine herbs pesto, again, example is parsley, tarragon chives, pine nuts, or almonds. Many pesto recipes include lemon juice as an antioxidant, which will help that pesto cube maintain its color and freshness if it's frozen for several months. And so you may want to include a little bit of lemon juice in all of your recipes. After doing this for almost 20 years, I really don't follow an exact recipe. So my recipe currently is I usually use 50% parsley and 50% other herbs. And so my typical, what I just call herb cube, is 50% parsley. And depending on what's available in the garden, what my tastes are for that day, I'll just go out and collect a variety of other herbs to put in there with the parsley. And so what I find is my basic herb cube changes from batch to batch, changes from year to year. And again, about 50% parsley and 50% other herbs. And so you can get very creative in what you want to do. My wife this year found that she was using a lot of oregano and basil together in her cooking. And so she said, why don't you make me a basil oregano cube? And so that's what I did. I didn't follow any specific recipe, just used about 50% basil, 50% oregano, a little bit of a chive, use some slivered almonds and olive oil. That became a basil oregano cube. So you can't be very creative in how you put these herb cubes together. This one is from the Herb Society of America's Guide to Garlic. What I really like about their individual herb guides is not only gives you extensive information about each herb and how to grow it, but gives you recipes at the end. This is for herbs de Provence and roasted garlic. This one's a little bit more involved in making, but it's a delicious one. You have to roast the garlic first, and then includes basil, sweet marjoram, thyme, rosemary, summer savory, bay leaf, sage, fennel seeds, and lavender, which are all typically found in herbs de Provence mixtures. This is a really delicious one, and I think the lavender adds quite a bit to this recipe as well. My wife and I do a lot of stir fry cooking, and we like this Southeast Asian pesto. This came from the Herb Society of American Guide on Basil. It includes a lot of fresh ginger, so it's very heavy on garlic and ginger. It includes lemongrass, onions. I usually use a Thai basil, fresh coriander that we call cilantro. If you want to make it a little spicier, you can add some fresh hot chilies or chili paste. Again, almonds and peanut oil, sesame oil, and a little bit of vinegar. This is a delicious pesto to use for stir fry or if you do Asian cooking. Shiso is an herb that's sort of unique to Japan. This recipe came from a Japanese restaurant named Tokyo Cafe in Kansas City. Shiso comes in either sort of a green or a purple variety and is a really good match to fish. So the shiso pesto is very straightforward. I actually grow the purple variety, so it has sort of a unique purple color when you make this pesto. It's shiso and garlic, again, some fresh ginger, scallions, or again, I usually use chives, some olive oil, a little bit of citrus juice, and salt. And this is a wonderful pesto to use in conjunction with fish, either fresh or again, frozen. My wife and I also use a lot of lemon pesto, and you can make this with lemon balm or lemon verbena. And my favorite combination is usually use a combination of both. So use about 50% lemon balm by volume, about 50% lemon verbena, a little bit of garlic, again, usually a little bit of slivered almonds to help chop it up, and olive oil. And this is wonderful to use again for stir fries and casseroles and soups. Herb vinegars and herb infused oils offer cooks really a convenient way of incorporating the essence of summer herbs all year round. You can use herb vinegars in dressings, marinades, steamed vegetables, soups, sauces, and stews. And the sharp tanginess of the vinegar really allows cooking with less or no salt or other seasoning. In the handout or notes of the accompany the presentation, there are a number of different examples of common herb vinegar combinations. I most commonly made tarragon vinegar. And if you're going to preserve food or use flavored vinegars, I would point you to a publication from the University of Georgia. The full citation for that is listed in the notes, or you can just search on Georgia publication FDNS E1, and it's an excellent handout on preserving food and details of creating herb vinegars. Herb infused oils have such a concentrated flavor that really only a small amount is needed to enhance the seasoning versus just using fresh or dried herbs. Usually mild oils that won't compete with the herb flavors are best. So canola, corn, light olive, safflower, or soy oil. I was first exposed to herb infused oils with a company called Lait Olivier when we visited Nice in southern France, and their stores would have over 30 or 40 different herb infused oils that can be purchased. You can also make your own herb infused oils, but a note of caution: if you make your own oils, there are potentially food safety issues. This is primarily from the organisms that cause botulism, and the botulinum organisms will produce spores in the soil that will contaminate the herbs. They like to grow in an anaerobic environment, or environment that's very low in oxygen. If you take herbs that have the botulinum spores and you put them in an oil where they're completely devoid of oxygen or very low oxygen levels, that may allow the organism to proliferate and create the toxin that could be a food safety issue. So if you make your own herb infused oils, I would encourage you to go to another extension publication. It's one from the University of Idaho. You just search on extension PNW664. It is an excellent resource that describes making garlic and herb infused oils at home. It will go through what you can do to avoid food safety concerns. Butters are also a good way to use herbs year round. Butter enhanced with herbs can be used as a spread, as an enhancement in food, or for sauteing. And herb butter can be prepared and kept frozen for use for up to 6 to 9 months. In the notes, there's a good combination of different herbs and butter that you can use. Finally, I enjoy wine, and there is a wine lover's guide to herbs that was published in one of the wine magazines several years ago. And there are some examples of good herb and wine grape or wine combinations. Pictured here are sage and Syrah, thyme and red Rioja or the Tempranillo grape, lemon verbena and Italian Pinot Grigio, garlic chives and Chablis or a California Chardonnay, Thai basil and Sauvignon Blanc, and there are others as well. So if you enjoy drinking wine, you might find that there are really good ways to combine wine and certain herbs. So if you have other questions about herbs, about growing herbs or using them, or any other garden question, would encourage you to contact an Extension Master Gardener volunteer through the Garden Helpline. The phone number listed here. There'll be people there to answer your questions Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from March through October during the active growing season. Or you can go ahead and email questions to buncomemg@gmail.com. Email is a really excellent way to submit questions because not only can you ask a question, you can attach pictures of plants, plant diseases, or pests that you would like to identify, and they can be more easily answered. Well, I hope you enjoyed this presentation on processing and using herbs. I enjoy growing many different kinds of herbs and enjoy creating many different kinds of pestos and using herbs in my everyday kitchen. And I hope this gives you some ideas about how to better utilize culinary herbs in your kitchens. Happy gardening.